Hey there, viewers. Here's a question. Have you ever seen someone slip up on live TV and instantly regret it? Drop the most shocking live moment you've ever witnessed in the comments. Today's story is about Diddy making a mistake on a live stream that he couldn't take back, and what happened next left everyone stunned. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. The live stream that vanished. I wasn't even looking for it. That's the part that still sticks with me. It wasn't one of those deep dive internet rabbit holes where you spend hours chasing some theory. It was just a random click, a casual scroll past some thread I barely paid attention to, until I did. Until something about it made me pause. It was a post buried deep in a forum I hadn't visited in years. The kind of place where conspiracy theorists, retired hackers, and weird internet lurkers threw around their latest findings. The title was vague, nothing flashy, just a question. Anyone else see that Diddy stream last night? I almost ignored it. But the thread was growing. It had this frantic energy to it, like the people in it weren't just discussing something. They were trying to piece together a puzzle they weren't even sure existed. That was the first sign that something was off. The second? The post had barely been up for a few hours, but users were already saying their comments were being deleted. Not reported, not flagged, deleted. And it wasn't just mods cleaning house. Whole replies were disappearing mid-conversation. People swore they saw something, and yet none of them saw quite the same thing. I started reading. Some swore Diddy had been on Instagram Live like he usually was, just playing music, drinking, talking to his audience. Nothing weird at first, but then there was the moment. The thing that had them all scrambling to make sense of what they saw. A woman's voice, a sharp, startled scream off camera. Diddy had frozen mid-sentence, not the kind of "oops, my bad" freeze you get when someone knocks on your door. No, this was different. He stared straight at the screen like he forgot for a second that it was there. Then, in the blink of an eye, the stream cut out. Not paused, not ended, gone. Users refreshed. Nothing. The video was wiped instantly. No replays, no snippets, no live-ended message. Just gone. People started asking each other, did anyone record it? Some said they did, but when they tried to upload, the file wouldn't play. One guy swore he had it saved to his phone, but when he went back to check, the video was corrupted. Just a black screen with distorted audio that didn't match what he remembered. I wasn't sure what to think. I mean, I'd seen internet hysteria before. People overreact, they misremember things. But something about this was different. This wasn't just one person with a half-baked story. These were hundreds of people, all insisting they had seen something. Except none of them could agree on what it was. One person swore Diddy had gotten up suddenly, like he was going to cut the camera himself. Another claimed he was still sitting there when the feed disappeared, his face stuck in an unreadable expression. And then there were the outliers. A few users started saying the video didn't just cut out, it glitched. They remembered seeing things in the frame that shouldn't have been there. Shadows moving in the background that didn't match the light source. Blurred figures behind him, shifting in and out of focus. One person even swore the video had rewound itself for a second before the screen turned black. That part made me pause. I'd seen video distortions before, but this sounded like the footage was being altered in real time. I decided to check myself. I tried finding any trace of the stream. Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, even some private Discord servers that kept backups of controversial celeb videos. Nothing. No trending hashtags, no reaction clips. The entire thing had been wiped. And that's when I knew it wasn't just hysteria. Celebrities go viral over nothing. You sneeze funny on camera and it's clipped, memed, remixed into 1,000 versions before you can even blink. But this was the opposite. Something happened on that live stream, and someone, maybe Diddy himself, made sure it was erased. But you can't erase everything. Not completely. I kept digging, scrolling through the comments that hadn't been wiped yet. That's when I saw it. An account claiming to have saved the full video. No attached file, no link, just a vague message. I recorded the whole thing, but you don't want to see it. I checked the username. It had been deleted. Not by them, by someone else. The post was still there, but their profile, gone. I clicked on another thread and I saw more deleted accounts. A handful of users who had been commenting earlier in the day were just wiped from the forum. Their entire post history gone, like they'd never existed. I checked Twitter, Reddit, even YouTube comments under old Diddy videos. It was happening there too. Every mention of the livestream was either buried, deleted, or met with weird, vague replies. The ones still up. They weren't asking about the stream anymore. They were asking why no one was talking about it. And then I saw it. The final comment before the thread got locked. A single sentence, posted by someone who hadn't said a word until now. It wasn't supposed to go public. I sat there, staring at the screen, feeling this cold, creeping feeling crawl up my spine. Because that was the first time I felt it. This wasn't just a celebrity slip-up. Something had leaked. And whatever it was, they had scrambled to erase it before anyone noticed. But people had noticed. They'd seen something, heard something, and even if the footage was gone, even if they deleted every last comment, the memory of it wouldn't just disappear. I refreshed the page. The entire thread was gone, like it had never existed. I exhaled, feeling that weird, gnawing pull in my stomach. I knew I should drop it, let it go. But something told me that whatever happened on that stream, it wasn't over. Chapter 2, The Ghosts in the Frame. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept picturing that last message, the way it sat there for barely a minute before vanishing. It wasn't supposed to go public, that sentence. It wasn't just a warning. It felt like a correction, like someone reaching through the screen to erase a mistake that was never meant to happen. The thought wouldn't let me rest, so I did what I always did when something didn't sit right. I started looking for people who saw what I couldn't. Tracking them down wasn't easy. Most of the original comments had already been wiped, their accounts gone without a trace, but there were ways around that. Cached pages, old threads archived before they were deleted, half-saved discussions still floating in forgotten corners of the web. That was how I found the first person. She went by Spectre, which already told me she was the kind of person who didn't like being seen. Her posts were short, vague, like she wasn't sure she should even be talking about what she saw. I sent her a message anyway. I didn't expect a response. I almost moved on. But then, hours later, she answered. "I saw it live," she wrote, "but it wasn't the same for everyone." That was the first time I realized this wasn't just about something getting deleted. It was about something being changed. We went back and forth for a while. She was hesitant, like she wasn't sure how much to say, but piece by piece I pulled the details out of her. She said she'd been watching from the start, and at first it was just a normal Diddy livestream. He was doing what he always did, talking, promoting, playing music, sipping on a drink. Nothing seemed off, not right away, but then something pulled his attention off screen. He stopped mid-sentence. His eyes flicked to the side. He stared for just a second too long, like he was registering something that shouldn't have been there. Then, as quickly as it happened, he snapped back to the camera and kept going like nothing was wrong. But she swore she saw the exact moment his energy changed. He was still talking, still playing it cool, but there was something behind his expression now, something tight, something wary. He started looking over his shoulder every few seconds, like he was checking for something. He kept adjusting the camera angle, shifting the frame slightly, as if he was trying to cut something out of view. That's when she noticed it. The background was wrong, she told me. At first, she couldn't place it. The room looked normal. Expensive furniture, soft lighting, the kind of polished setting you'd expect. But every time the camera moved, something was off. Shadows didn't land where they should have. Objects seemed to flicker slightly, like they were struggling to exist in the space. And then there was the movement. She swore she saw someone behind him. Not directly behind, not clear enough to make out features, but there was a shape, a figure. It was there 1 second, then gone the next. The kind of thing your brain tells you to ignore because it doesn't make sense. But she wasn't the only one who noticed it. The second person I tracked down had a completely different experience. He went by Domino, another throwaway username, another account that had barely posted before, but he was certain of what he saw. He told me he didn't remember seeing any shadows or flickering objects. What he remembered was Diddy talking to someone off camera. According to him, there was a moment where Diddy wasn't alone. The whole mood of the stream changed. His body language shifted. His voice dropped lower, more serious. He wasn't performing anymore. He was talking to someone. But the strange part? There was no one there, Domino said. At least, not to him. He swore he saw Diddy reacting to something, nodding, responding, even looking irritated like he was arguing with someone. But the space beside him was empty. No other voice, no second presence visible on screen. Just Diddy and the silence. The third person I found had an even stranger take. They didn't want to talk at first. Their account had already been deleted, but I found an old Discord message they'd sent in a private server. When I finally convinced them to share what they remembered, they hesitated for a long time before typing out one simple message. I think he knew he was alive, but not at first. That confused me. "What do you mean?" I asked. He was acting like it was private, like he was talking to someone in a closed call, and then it hit him. You could see it in his face. He realized he wasn't supposed to be broadcasting. This wasn't someone getting caught off guard. This wasn't a slip-up. This was someone who thought they were in control, only to realize they weren't. Understandably, I went back through the messages, cross-checking the accounts, looking for overlaps in their stories. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach twist. None of them saw the exact same thing. Some people remembered Diddy cutting the feed himself. Others swore it just disappeared. Some saw movement in the background. Others saw nothing but Diddy, alone. It was like reality had fractured for those few minutes, like no two people had been allowed to witness the same version of events. And the more I dug, the worse it got. There were other posts, scattered across different platforms, but the details kept shifting. Some viewers remembered his expression being blank, like he was frozen in place. Others said he lunged forward, not to turn off the camera, but as if he was reaching toward it. One person swore up and down that just before the screen cut, he muttered something under his breath. "I know what you did." I read that sentence over and over again, feeling the weight of it settle in my chest. It could have been a misunderstanding, a misheard phrase in the chaos of a sudden shutdown. Or maybe it was something else. Maybe it was something he wasn't saying to himself. Maybe it was something he was saying to us. The more I searched, the fewer traces I found. Posts were vanishing, accounts were going dark. It wasn't just deletions anymore. It was like the discussion was being guided, nudged into silence, and the more I thought about it, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that something had leaked that night, something that wasn't supposed to. But the question wasn't just what we saw. It was why we weren't allowed to remember it the same way. Chapter 3. The Unlisted Party. It was easy to get lost in the chaos of the live stream mystery, but the more I looked, the more I realized that the answers weren't just in what people saw on their screens. There was another piece to this puzzle, something that happened away from the cameras, behind the scenes, where no one was supposed to be watching. I hadn't considered it at first. My focus had been on the stream, on the people who watched it vanish in real time. But then I stumbled onto something that made me look in a different direction. It was a throwaway comment in one of the few remaining forum threads, a simple observation that should have meant nothing. Wasn't there a party that night? That was all it said, but it sent me spiraling. Because there was a party, not just any party, one of those invite-only, ultra-exclusive gatherings that didn't get posted about until long after they ended, if at all. The kind of party where phones were taken at the door, where NDAs were handed out like candy, where the people inside weren't just celebrities, but the ones who owned them. I started looking. At first, all I found were whispers, vague mentions buried in private Discord servers and locked group chats. Nobody wanted to talk about it. The people who did talk acted like it was a joke, throwing out exaggerated rumors, making it sound like just another industry event. But then I found someone who had actually been there. They weren't a guest. They weren't even supposed to be inside. They worked the event security, a low-level position, the kind of person who was invisible to the ones who mattered. They wouldn't tell me their real name, but they admitted one thing. Something went wrong that night. I asked them to explain. "You don't understand," they said. "These parties have rules. Nothing happens by accident. Nothing is unplanned. But that night, something wasn't supposed to happen, and everyone knew it." The first red flag was the security. These events were always locked down, but this time it was different. It wasn't just about keeping people out. It was about keeping something in. The tension was obvious from the moment they arrived. Guards were constantly checking in with each other, speaking into earpieces, not just standing at their usual posts, but pacing, scanning, waiting for something. And the guests, they felt it. They were rich, powerful, untouchable. But that night there was an unease in the air. Conversations were quieter, laughter was strained, people stuck to their small circles, glancing toward the security team more often than usual, as if they could sense that something was off, even if they didn't know what. Then there were the phones. Phones were always confiscated at these events. Standard procedure, nothing unusual. But this time, it wasn't just a formality, it was aggressive. The staff didn't just take them. They searched people, checked for backups, made sure nothing got through. Some guests were annoyed, but most just complied. This was the price of access. This was what they had signed up for. Then there was the room. Every venue had restricted areas, places where only the highest level guests were allowed, where the real business happened. But this wasn't just a VIP section. This was something else. A single door, guarded more heavily than the entrance itself. No one went in, no one came out. The security in front of it wasn't like the other guards. They weren't there for show. They weren't just watching for drunk celebrities trying to stumble in where they didn't belong. They were watching for something else. That's when the argument happened. The staff member I spoke to wasn't close enough to hear everything, but they caught enough. Two men, both dressed in black, both looking important, huddled near the door, their voices sharp, urgent, nervous. They were arguing about something technical, something about a feed. It wasn't supposed to go live. The words weren't meant for anyone else, but they slipped out, clear enough that even the people standing nearby stopped pretending not to listen. The two men caught themselves, lowering their voices, pulling away, disappearing back behind the guarded door. And that was the end of it. Except it wasn't, because that's when the tech crew arrived. They weren't supposed to be there. Not like that. These kinds of events had AV teams, sure, but they worked before the party, setting up the sound systems, making sure the lighting was right. They weren't supposed to be packing up equipment in the middle of the night. But there they were, pulling cables, loading cases, moving fast, avoiding eye contact with anyone who looked at them for too long. And their faces? They looked scared, the staff member told me, like they wanted to be anywhere else but there. I asked them if they knew what kind of equipment was being taken down. They hesitated. Cameras. I went still. There were cameras? not normal ones. They said these were different. They weren't set up for the party, they were set up for something else. Something else. I asked if they knew where the cameras had been placed. Another hesitation. Near the room. That was all they would say. The party continued. People drank, people danced. By the next morning, photos leaked, names were dropped, and the whole thing was reduced to just another elite gathering. But there was no mention of the security, no mention of the argument, no mention of the equipment that had been packed up in a hurry, and absolutely no mention of the room. I sat back, reading over everything they had told me, and I felt that same creeping unease from before. Because it wasn't just a party, it wasn't just another closed-door event for the rich and powerful. It was something else. And the more I thought about it, the more I couldn't ignore the obvious. The live stream and the party, they overlapped. Not just in time, but in purpose. I kept going over the details, trying to fit the pieces together. The heightened security, the confiscated phones, the cameras placed near the room, the panicked argument about a feed going live. And then I realized something. Diddy wasn't the only one on that stream. Maybe that was why it was wiped so fast. Maybe it wasn't just about something he did. Maybe it was about something that was seen. Something that wasn't supposed to be there. And the biggest question of all, was the stream an accident, or was it meant for someone else? And if it was meant for someone else, then why, for those few minutes, did the whole world get to watch? Chapter 4. The Sudden Shutdown. I was ready to accept that the stream was gone, wiped clean, scrubbed from existence like it had never happened. I had seen enough digital cover-ups to know when something wasn't just deleted, it was erased. But then, in the middle of the night, I found it, a single surviving fragment. It wasn't on YouTube or Twitter or any of the places you'd expect. It was buried deep in an archival website, one of those obscure, barely functioning forums where old media clips went to die. The kind of site that hadn't been updated in years, its pages loaded with broken links and half-rendered images. But there, hidden in the clutter, was a thread titled simply, "Diddy Live Clip, Bit." The post itself was vague, no context, no description, just a direct download link from an anonymous user who hadn't posted anything else before or since. I hesitated before clicking. Something about it felt too easy. But curiosity won. The file was small, compressed to hell, the kind of quality you'd expect from a leaked video recorded off an ancient phone screen. When I clicked play, the screen glitched, the pixels shifting like static on an old TV. The colors were off, the contrast was too sharp, and the frames stuttered every few seconds like the footage itself was decaying. And then, there he was. Diddy sat in his usual setting, drink in hand, music playing softly in the background. At first, he looked completely normal, mid-conversation, probably responding to comments or talking about his latest business venture. His voice was warped, slowed down, almost dragging, but I could still hear the rhythm of his words beneath the distortion. Then he stopped. Not like he was pausing to think, not like he had finished a sentence and was waiting to speak again. He stopped in a way that wasn't natural. His eyes flicked to the side, toward something just outside the camera's view. The easy confidence he had a second ago was gone. His entire face changed, tightening in a way that didn't read as surprise, it read as recognition. He wasn't confused, he wasn't startled. He knew what he was looking at. The room was silent except for the faint hum of whatever music he had been playing. He stayed frozen like that for a few seconds, his body completely still, his shoulders squared, like he was waiting for something to happen. And then it did. A sound, sharp, quick, something just on the edge of being recognizable. A knock? A voice? I couldn't tell. The clip's audio was warped, the frequency dipping in and out like a corrupted file, but whatever it wasn't part of the music. It wasn't supposed to be there. Diddy's expression flickered, just for a second, and then the video cut. Not a clean cut, not like he had ended the stream himself. It was sudden, jarring, unnatural. I sat back, staring at the frozen screen, the last frame still burned into the pixels. This wasn't how people had described it. The witnesses from the forums swore he had lunged for the camera. Others said the feed had glitched first, then disappeared. Some said he looked scared, others said he looked angry, and now, in the only surviving clip, he looked like something else entirely. Something wasn't right. I replayed it again and again. Every time I noticed something new. The way the color shifted slightly, like the lighting in the room was different from one frame to the next. The way his hand twitched just before the cut, like he was about to move. And most of all, the background. It was subtle, almost impossible to notice unless you were really looking. But I saw it. The shadows didn't matter. The objects in the room, the furniture, the way the light hit them was wrong. The angles shifted slightly, inconsistently, as if the scene itself was being altered frame by frame. I pulled the file apart, frame by frame, slowing it down to a crawl. And that's when I found it. One frame, one single frame. Right before the feed cut, just a fraction of a second before the screen went dark. There was something else in the room. A shape, a presence. Not fully visible, but enough to register as wrong. A figure, barely distinguishable, standing in the blurred background. I couldn't make out a face, couldn't even tell if it was human. The distortion was too heavy, the frame too corrupted, but it was there. And Diddy had seen it. The realization sent a cold shock through me. Because this wasn't just a glitch. This wasn't just a bad connection. This was a correction. Someone, somewhere, had edited this footage in real time. And if this clip was different from what other people remembered, then what did that mean? It meant no two people saw the same version of what happened. I checked the forum again, desperate to find more clips, more evidence, something that could confirm what I had just seen, but the thread was gone. Not just locked, deleted. The account that posted the video, wiped. No history, no record, like it had never existed. I tried downloading the file again, but the link was broken. The entire site felt altered, like something had moved through it, cleaning up every trace, every lead, every clue. And then I saw the new message. Not from a forum user, not from anyone I had spoken to before. It was an anonymous reply in another thread, a thread that had nothing to do with Diddy. It was just 2 words, stop looking. No username, no profile attached, just a post that hadn't been there 5 minutes ago. And then it disappeared too. I shut my laptop and stared at the dark screen. My hands were cold, my mouth was dry. Because this wasn't just about a live stream anymore. This was about control. Not just over the video, not just over the people who saw it, but over memory itself. Someone had altered the footage. Someone had altered reality. And I wasn't sure if I had just witnessed a mistake or a warning. Chapter 5. The Man Who Erased the Evidence. The more I tried to forget about the clip, the more it burrowed into my brain. That single distorted frame, the one I wasn't supposed to see, stuck with me like an afterimage burned into my eyes. I had watched it over and over again, slowing it down, zooming in, trying to make sense of the shape in the background. It wasn't just a trick of the light. Someone had been there. Something had been there, and Diddy had seen it before the stream cut out. I needed answers. By this point, I knew I couldn't trust the usual sources. The forum was wiped. The clip was gone. Even the people who had originally talked about it had started to disappear. Not just their accounts, but their posts, their names. If I didn't know better, I'd think I had imagined the whole thing. But there was one person I hadn't reached out to yet, someone whose name I had come across a few times in buried discussions, a shadowy figure who supposedly had worked on the back end of Diddy's digital presence, a guy who wasn't just some random internet commenter, but someone who had been inside the machine. someone who knew how it worked. I didn't know his real name. Online, he went by Vector. It took me a while to track him down. His accounts were mostly inactive, old profiles abandoned like empty buildings. But every so often, he would leave a digital footprint, a comment on a private tech forum, a vague reply in a cybersecurity thread. If he was as paranoid as I suspected, he didn't want to be found. But I found him anyway. I sent him a message, short, to the point. I need to talk about the live stream. Hours passed, then a day. Nothing. I was starting to think he wouldn't respond when a new message popped up in my inbox. No introduction, no greeting, just a single line. "How did you get this account?" I told him I wasn't important, that I just wanted to know what happened, that I had seen the clip, the real one, before it was deleted. I waited. Then another reply. "You shouldn't have seen that." My heart started beating faster. "Then tell me why." There was another long pause, then finally he answered. "Diddy's live streams aren't normal." I asked him what that meant. "They're not real time." I didn't understand at first. Live streams by definition were real time, that's the entire point. But he explained it differently. They go through a filtration system before the audience sees them. A filtration system. My stomach twisted. "You're saying they're edited while they're happening?" "Not just edited, controlled, adjusted. If something happens that shouldn't, it gets altered before it reaches the viewers. And if something slips through, well, you already know what happens then." I sat there rereading his words, trying to wrap my head around it. Wow, that was the only question that mattered. At first, he didn't answer. Minutes passed. Then, finally, a new message appeared. "Because he needs them to be clean." Clean how? No mistakes, no slip-ups, no unintended footage. Every second of every stream is monitored. Anything that doesn't fit the narrative gets erased. My mind raced back to the different accounts of the live stream, how no two people had described the same thing. Some said they saw figures in the background, others saw nothing. Some remembered Diddy ending the stream himself, others swore it just cut off. Because the system was filtering it in real time. People weren't watching the same stream. They were watching different versions of it. I felt a cold wave of nausea roll over me. Who decides what gets erased? Another pause, longer this time. Not me. I pushed harder. Then who? He stopped responding. I stared at the chat window, waiting for the 3 dots to appear, for some sign that he was still there. Nothing. I typed again. Vector? Still nothing. Then, right in front of my eyes, his previous messages started disappearing. Not like he was deleting them manually. This was different. They vanished all at once, one after another, as if the system itself was pulling them back. Then his account was gone. I checked my inbox. The thread was empty. No history, no proof. He had been erased. I sat there, heart pounding, staring at the blank screen. It didn't feel like I had just lost a source. It felt like I had just lost a witness. Someone had been watching, and they had just decided to clean up the mess. Chapter 6. The redacted guest list. Vector was gone. Just like that. His messages erased, his account wiped, his digital footprint scrubbed clean as if he had never existed. I wasn't naive. I knew what that meant. Someone had been watching, listening, waiting for him to say too much. And the second he crossed that line, they made sure he disappeared. I should have stopped. I should have walked away. But I couldn't, because there was still one question I couldn't answer. The one that had been gnawing at the back of my mind ever since I started piecing this together. It wasn't just about the live stream. It wasn't just about the footage being altered in real time. It was about the party. And more specifically, about who had been there. I already knew the basics. It had been an invite-only event, the kind where NDAs were mandatory and security was tighter than the White House. The usual crowd had been there. A-list celebrities, industry moguls, the kind of people whose faces alone could fill headlines for weeks. But as I started digging through guest lists, leaks, and scattered mentions of the night, I noticed something strange. A missing name. Most guest lists were compiled after the fact, usually from paparazzi shots or social media posts, but this time they didn't match up. There were gaps, inconsistencies, names that were there in one version and missing in another. And one name in particular had been censored completely. Not missing, censored. Like it had been deliberately removed. I started cross-referencing different sources, old event planners, leaked RSVPs, archived websites that hadn't been updated yet. I went down every possible path, retracing the digital footprints of that night, looking for anything that hadn't been wiped clean. And that's when I found it. A single mention, buried in a long-forgotten forum post from a former industry assistant, written before the thread was locked and the account was deleted. The name was unfamiliar. It wasn't an A-list celebrity, not even a minor influencer. It was a woman, someone I had never heard of before. I searched for her. Nothing. No Wikipedia page. No Instagram. No mentions in entertainment blogs or old tabloid stories. It was like she didn't exist. But that didn't make sense, because according to what little information was left, she had existed once. A former model. A performer, maybe. No major credits, no breakout success. But she had been in the industry. Until she wasn't. Her last known appearance was years ago. A brief mention in an old red carpet event. And then, suddenly, she disappeared. No explanation. No public farewell. Just gone. I kept looking. I found one old interview. Not a video, just a transcript. A low-level entertainment reporter had spoken to her at some event over a decade ago. The questions were generic, surface level. But there was one answer that stood out. She had been asked about working in the industry, about what it was like being around certain powerful figures. Her answer was vague, careful, like she was choosing every word with precision. Not everyone in this business is what they seem. That was it. That was all she had said before the topic changed. But now, years later, she was the only name missing from the guest list of that party. I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. Because this wasn't a coincidence. This woman, whoever she was at that party, and someone made sure no one knew she had been there. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. The off-limits room, the heightened security, the urgency of the tech crew packing up cameras, and the live stream. The voice that people claimed to hear before the feed was cut. Could it have been her? Was that why the footage had to be altered in real time? Because somehow, some way, she had been seen. I needed more. I reached out to the only person I knew might have answers, the staff member who had worked security at the party. I hadn't spoken to them since our last conversation, and I wasn't sure if they'd even respond, but I had to try. I sent them the name. No context, no questions, just the name. They replied almost instantly. "Where did you get this?" That was all they said. Not, "Who is this?" Not, "What does this mean?" They already knew who she was. I typed back. She was there, wasn't she? Another long pause. Then, finally, "You need to stop looking." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "Tell me what happened," I sent back. No response. "Please." Still nothing. I sat there, staring at the blinking cursor, waiting, hoping. And then, after what felt like forever, I saw 3 dots appear. Type. Then finally the message came through. I don't know what happened to her. My hands were shaking as I typed. But she was at that party? Another pause. Then, yes, a chill ran down my spine. I took a deep breath and typed the only question that mattered now. Did she leave? No reply. I waited and waited. Minutes passed. Then, an hour. Nothing. I checked the chat again, but something was wrong. The previous messages were gone. Not just mine, theirs. It was like the conversation had never happened. I reached out again, but the account was gone. Erased. Like it had never existed. I felt sick. Someone didn't want this name to be found. Someone had buried her. And the worst part? I didn't know if she had ever made it out of that party alive. Chapter 7. The last known footage. I hadn't planned on meeting anyone in person. This was never supposed to be more than an online rabbit hole. Something I could investigate from the safety of a screen. Just another mystery to obsess over late at night. But after everything that had happened, the disappearing messages, the erased accounts, the missing guest list, I knew I wasn't going to find the truth by just sitting behind my laptop anymore. I needed to see it for myself. That's what led me to the archivist. I had come across their name in one of the deeper corners of the internet, a place where lost media collectors and rogue digital preservationists shared pieces of things that were never meant to be found again. They went by Kiro, and from what I could gather, they specialized in reconstructing corrupted files, piecing together deleted data, restoring videos that had been wiped from the web. I wasn't sure if I could trust them, but when I reached out, their response was immediate. I have it. I almost didn't believe them. How? I asked. There was a pause before they answered. I recorded it myself. I felt my stomach tighten. Kiro wasn't just someone who had found the footage. They had been watching when it happened. They had seen what I had only been chasing in fragments. I need to see it, I typed back. Another pause. Not online. That was the last thing I wanted. Meeting up in person was dangerous, reckless even, but some part of me knew I didn't have a choice. So I agreed. The meeting spot was out of the way, a dimly lit cafe on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place where no one asked questions, where people came and went without being noticed. I got there first, took a seat in the back, and waited. When Kiro arrived, I recognized them immediately. Not because I had seen them before, but because they looked like someone who lived in the dark corners of the internet. Thin, hunched shoulders, eyes that flicked around the room like they were scanning for threats. They carried a beat-up laptop tucked under one arm, and as soon as they sat down, they leaned in close. "You didn't tell anyone, right?" I shook my head. They didn't look convinced. "I don't do this," Kiro muttered. "I don't meet people. Ever." "Then why now?" I asked. They hesitated, glancing around again before lowering their voice. "Because something's wrong with this video." My pulse quickened. "How do you mean?" Instead of answering, Kiro opened their laptop and placed it between us. "You tell me." They clicked play, and I saw it. The real stream. It started the same way as before, Diddy sitting there, drink in hand, talking to the camera. But the quality was different. Cleaner, unedited. This wasn't the fragmented, corrupted clip I had found before. This was the original, and there was something deeply, fundamentally wrong with it. Diddy wasn't relaxed. He wasn't laughing, drinking, playing music. He was staring. His eyes were locked onto the camera, not in a way that suggested he was reading comments or engaging with viewers, but like he was watching someone, or something. The longer I watched, the more unsettled I felt, because he wasn't moving. At least, not at first. There were no hand gestures, no casual movements. He just sat there, perfectly still, his chest barely rising as he breathed. The only thing that moved was his mouth. At first, I didn't even realize he was speaking. His lips moved in slow, careful shapes, but there was no sound, no audio at all. I turned to Kiro. "Where's the sound?" They swallowed hard. "It's there," they said. "You just can't hear it yet." They clicked something on their keyboard. The screen flickered, and suddenly the audio came through. A low, garbled hum, distorted, stretched, like something had been slowed down just enough to sound inhuman. I clenched my jaw, trying to focus. And then I heard it. The words. It was faint at first, barely distinguishable through the layers of static, but Kiro enhanced the audio, adjusting the levels, and slowly, painfully, the phrase became clear. This wasn't supposed to go live. I felt my body go cold. Because I had seen this before. I had seen people type those words in deleted forum posts, whispering about what they had heard during the stream. But this was different. This wasn't speculation. This was him, Diddy, saying it. Before I could react, the video continued. As soon as those words left his mouth, his expression changed. The first time I had watched the corrupted clip, I had seen him look away from the camera. But here, it was different. His eyes widened. Not in surprise, not in anger. In fear. Something off screen had caught his attention. And then, the knock. Louder this time, clearer. A single sharp knock that echoed through the speakers like it had been coming from the room we were sitting in. Diddy's entire body stiffened. He turned his head slightly, just enough to glance at whatever was behind the camera. And then, the screen cut to black. Kiro slammed the laptop shut. I jumped, my heartbeat thudding in my ears. "What the hell was that?" I hissed. Kiro was shaking their head, eyes darting around like they had just realized we were being watched. "We're done." "No," I said, my voice low but firm. "You don't get to drop this on me and walk away." What was he looking at? Who knocked? Kiro swallowed hard. "I don't know." I stared at them. "That's bullshit." They didn't answer. I reached for the laptop, but they yanked it away. "It's gone," they muttered. "I already deleted it." "What? Why the hell would you?" "Because I don't want to end up like the others." Their voice was sharp, panicked. People in the cafe turned to look. Kiro took a deep breath, lowering their voice again. "You don't get it," they whispered. "That wasn't just some accidental live stream. That was a mistake. And someone, whoever's cleaning this up, they don't like mistakes." I felt a weight settle in my stomach. "You think they're watching us?" Kiro didn't answer. They just stood up, grabbed their laptop, and walked away. I watched them go, a sinking feeling crawling up my spine. Because I wasn't sure which part was worse, the fact that they had the unedited footage, or the fact that they were too terrified to keep it. Chapter 8. The Final Disappearance. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the video playing over and over in my head. Diddy sitting there, motionless, his lips moving without sound, his eyes widening with something that wasn't surprise but fear. And then, those words. This wasn't supposed to go live. The knock. The screen cutting to black. And Kiro, across from me, slamming their laptops shut like they were trying to trap something inside. I woke up feeling like I had dreamt the whole thing. The cafe, the paranoia in Kiro's voice, the look in their eyes when they realized they had shown me too much. But it wasn't a dream. It was real, and I had proof. Or at least, I thought I did. I grabbed my phone, scrolling through my messages, looking for the thread with Kiro, but it wasn't there. Not just the last conversation, the entire chat history was gone. I checked my inbox, no emails, no trace of our meeting. I opened my laptop, trying to log into the forum where I had first contacted them. The page wouldn't load. My hands felt cold. This was happening again. First Vector, now Kiro. I had spent the last few weeks watching evidence disappear, posts get wiped, entire accounts erased like they had never existed. But this time it wasn't just happening to strangers on a forum, it was happening to me. I tried calling Kiro, The number didn't go through. I checked their social media, all accounts deleted. I even went back to the cafe, sitting in the same booth, waiting, hoping I'd see them again. But they never showed. I started asking around. I knew they had contacts in the underground archivist community, people who collected lost media, people who were obsessed with digital preservation. If anyone had seen Kiro, it would be them. But no one had. Or if they had, they weren't saying. I checked old Discord servers, private forums, even hidden boards where anonymous users discussed media that had vanished from the internet. Nothing. Kiro had been erased. And with them, so had the footage. I searched every corner of the web, every forum, every archive, every place I could think of where something like this might have been mirrored or leaked. But it was like the video had never existed in the first place. The only thing left was the memory of it. I wasn't sure how long I spent staring at my screen, refreshing the same pages, opening and closing tabs as if suddenly appear if I just looked hard enough. Then, right as I was about to give up, a new email appeared in my inbox. No subject line, no sender information. Just a single sentence. Stop looking, it's already been corrected. My breath caught in my throat. I read the words over and over again, my eyes scanning them for anything hidden, any clue that could tell me who sent this, how they knew I was still searching. But there was nothing. Nothing except the cold, unshakable certainty that whoever was behind this, they were still watching me. And that scared me more than anything else. I shut my laptop and stared at the dark screen, my reflection barely visible in the glass. My thoughts were spinning, racing through everything I had uncovered, everything I had pieced together. Because this wasn't just about a live stream anymore. This wasn't just about Diddy slipping up on camera, or footage getting leaked before it could be wiped. This was about control. I thought back to what Vector had told me. Diddy's live streams aren't normal. They go through a filtration system before the audience sees them. If something slips through, it gets erased. And yet somehow this had slipped through. Not for long, just for a few minutes. Just enough for a handful of people to see something they weren't supposed to see. Was that the real mistake? Not that the footage was altered in real time, but that it wasn't altered fast enough? Had the system failed, even for just a moment? Or was it something else entirely? I kept coming back to that last question, the one I hadn't been able to shake since the beginning. What did Diddy forget that made this so dangerous? Because there was fear in his expression, real, raw fear. He wasn't just reacting to a glitch or a mistake. He was reacting to something he saw, and I still didn't know what it was. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to think logically. There were only two possibilities. One, the live stream was an accident. Something had gone wrong, the filter system had glitched, and something slipped through that wasn't meant to. Or two, the live stream was never supposed to be public at all. Maybe Diddy thought he was broadcasting to someone else. Maybe the entire stream had been intended for a different audience. But something went wrong. And for a brief, terrifying moment, the whole world got to watch. I thought about the missing woman, the one who had been erased from the guest list, the one whose name no longer existed in any public record. Was she in the room that night? Was that why Diddy froze? Was she the one who knocked? Or worse, had she already been there, standing in the shadows, watching him, the same way he had been watching the camera? I felt my stomach twist. Because if that was true, if she really had been on that stream for even a second, then it made sense why the footage had to be wiped. Why Kiro had disappeared. Why every person who got too close to this had been erased. Because this wasn't just about covering up an embarrassing moment. This was about removing someone from existence. I reached for my laptop again, fingers hovering over the keyboard. I wanted to keep searching. I wanted to know. But my gut told me I already did. It's already been corrected. I closed the laptop, and this time I didn't open it again.